He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. And here we go again. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him. I think too many times we think about a God of wrath, and we think about a God of judgment, and a God who's watching us closely to see when we mess up. Not to make sure we don't, but to see when we mess up. I mean, how many times have you joked? I know I do this. You know, you say something that may be a little circumspect, especially if you're standing here in the sanctuary and you step aside because you're thinking, well, maybe the lightning might strike right about there. So let me just move over a step. And hopefully that's humor. But how many of us in humor speak what is some of our truth, some of our real feelings? And yet, if we look at Jesus Christ as the pure image of God, Jesus Christ as who God hopes to be in our lives, as he meets us and reconciles with us through the sacrifice that he made, we see a man who went out of his way to reach out to those who were on the margins, to those who had been pushed to the sides, to those who were disrespected by religious authority of his day. He loved the unlovable. He touched the untouchable. He searched for those who were lost and could not be found. An amazing picture of a God that reaches out for us, that looks for us, that searches for us. It's really the picture of the Christmas story, how God wants to be accessible to us. As we talk about God who could have come in royalty, could have been born into a royal household if God wanted to. Matter of fact, I still believe that the kings went into Jerusalem looking for the royal family, fully expecting the king that was born, the star they saw, the sign of the young boy who was born king, the baby who was born king, to be in a royal family. I don't think he expected to go out into the margins, into Bethlehem, and to find a baby laying in a manger. I truly think that part of the story of the Christmas Day morning is that God spoke first to those on the margins, the shepherds out in the fields. Those people who weren't very well respected by the other people in town, those who held a lowly state. And God sent his angels first to give the message to the shepherds that they might celebrate and worship. God wants to be accessible. He's come to us in a way that he is easily accessible. And yet too many times we picture a God of wrath, a God who stands apart, a God who is so separate and holy. Not that God is not separate and holy. Don't lose yourself in the two extremes. There certainly is the middle ground here. It's not that God is not holy and other, but this holy and other God, and this is what makes it such a miracle to me, this holy and other God desires to be in relationship with us. Jesus didn't go looking for the brightest and the best when he searched for the people to follow him. He went to the common blue-collar worker, the fisherman. He took in a tax collector who was considered to be an outcast, one who was in collusion with the Roman Empire, who was oppressing Jerusalem in that day. He spent time teaching the crowds that were filled with the untouchables of his day, wanting to heal those who were broken. Touched lepers. Who touches lepers? It was considered a very highly contagious disease. And yet he spent time with those who had no other way to reach God. What a God we serve. How can we ever look at God the same when we know that Jesus, the lover and servant of all humankind, is in fact the fullness of God in human form? Remember how just before Jesus gave up his life, what did he do? He went to his disciples. They were getting ready for the Last Supper. He took off his outer garment. He wrapped a towel around his waist. He took a basin of water. He knelt down in front of them, and he washed their feet. Now, that job is not even given to Jews who were slaves. It was thought to be beneath them. and yet he washed their feet. And he said to them, do you remember what he said to them? He says, you call me master, and you're right to do so. And if I, your master and teacher, wash your feet, how much more should you do this for one another? If you're going to be a follower of mine, then you need to be a servant to all. How can we look at God differently? Or how can we look at God the same? Knowing who Jesus was and what he was attempting to do. And how can we ever look at other human beings who don't meet our specific standards, don't live up to our levels, don't meet our cultural norms? How can we ever treat them the same, knowing that God sought out those who were different than him? We're all different than God. But he also sought out the outcasts, the untouchables, the unlovables. He made them those who had starring roles in the story of redemption. Amazing God. This past week I spent 3 days in a continuing education setting. It was called Diversity Champions. It wasn't the old touchy-feely thing that you used to think of in the awareness stuff. It was actually amazing training in leadership, diversity and leadership. Learned a lot of leadership skills in this class. This was a military class, but it was very applicable to my work with the church. As a matter of fact, I have to do so much continuing ed a year for the church. I don't know if you know this or not, and I have to report it to the bishop what I did with my continuing ed as part of the charge conference that we have each year. And we have to do so many continuing ed hours or contact hours, CEU credits or contact hours. And this, in diversity and leadership are two areas that you can do training in that counts. So this actually took care of that as well. But one of the experiences we had, now imagine a group of people who have worked together. I haven't worked with everybody that was in the room. There was 28 of us in the room, but I worked with most of them for about 3 years, and I knew several of them very well. We're in this room together, and the room is filled with people from different cultures, women and men, Euro-Americans, African-Americans, gentlemen from Cuba, other islanders, several from Puerto Rico. I had some Pacific Islanders and Asians were in the classroom. Some who were, the general was in the classroom, so we had a one-star general in the classroom, and we had a staff sergeant who was what, I should know this, an E5. Staff sergeant's an E5, so only 5 rungs up the ladder on the enlisted side. So it was a big spread. Well, one of the things we had to do after working together closely in leadership and trust-building exercises was they set up 8 easels.